Long live the unity of creators and audiences and users of expressive material across the world in the interests of combating inequality, racism, exploitation, so that we can have a free flow of information and social progress. Long live! Long live. I don't know if, was there anybody opposed to that, General? My name is Ben Cashdan. I'm one of the founders of Recreate. I'm an economist and filmmaker and the producer of The Big Debate in South Africa. Formerly, I was an advisor in the Mandela presidency at the time of the fight over access to medicines. And that sort of provides some of the history to the fight that we're involved in today. I want to just, I went on to a little bit of AI this morning, and I Googled what is this conference, and it says this is a regular event that takes place every year to raise issues around copyright and development. In fact, it's the second one we've had, so AI got it a bit wrong, but it picked up that it's not the first one. This conference is the second one. The first one was in 2023, Kyla, January 2023. And boy, have things moved since then, with AI taking center stage in everybody's minds. And the other thing that popped up this morning was the latest news from the United States. Did anybody see the President of the United States post late last night, our time, early this morning, about South Africa?
Yes, we're behaving very badly.
We're behaving very badly. We are doing radical theft of land from certain classes of people. That's the direct quote in this post. In South Africa, radical theft of land from certain classes of people, and we're very bad, and all funding from the United States to South Africa is to be stopped immediately and not reinstated until the president and his people in the United States have had a chance to look into this very bad behavior. And I reflected on it for a moment. This is real. This was on Truth Social from the president last night. And my first reaction was, if only. If only we had a process of more active, more thorough redistribution of land and property in South Africa, because we remain the most unequal society on the planet. So we're being punished for something which we might have wanted to do, but we've gone very little of the direction in doing, and we're being punished for misinformation. But that inequality, that desire to redistribute, which we have gone some of the way to doing, when it comes to land, we've only redistributed about 10%, I think. Land was, 70%, 80% in the hands of white commercial farmers at the end of apartheid. And we've just redistributed, single, maybe just up to double digits land. So not a massive transformation. Intellectual property is another class of ownership, another class of property that symbolizes for many the deep divisions and the deep inequalities in the country. Perhaps when the President of the United States has finished punishing us for our radical redistribution of land, he'll want to punish us for what we come up with in this conference. Let's see. I want to show a few slides with a few statistics on and just a little bit of basic information about us. So this is Recreate. We are creators and users united for a common goal. We're a civil society movement in South Africa. We stand for the right to own, the right to earn, and the right to create, educate, and innovate. We operate in this society which is the most unequal in the world, according to World Bank and UN figures. And of course, one of the major contributors to climate change on the continent and in the world, faced with all of the problems, health, climate, water, that go along with that. I referred to one of our first major fights over intellectual property back in the 1990s when we were trying to get access to antiviral medicines for HIV. And we had to introduce legislation that proposed compulsory licensing and parallel importing. We didn't have to do those things because just the signal given by the legislation eventually, after some lawsuits and social movements, led to a radical drop in the price of antiretrovirals. Just a demonstration of how policy on IP can make a massive difference in the market for stuff that everybody needs. Well, we're not talking about medicines, we're talking about knowledge and copyright. And in an ideal world, you would have creators and audiences, and we grant copyright in order that there's an incentive for people to create, in order to protect those who are the creators, give them a market. So we, the people, grant that copyright, as you all know. Then come these guys. I left the big pharma at the top because that's the little historical marker. But then I think on this sheet, somebody will tell me if I've missed anyone really important in Africa, are the intermediaries in all the different sectors where copyright is at play, who are the big rights holders who have been granted copyright by creators and are then distributing knowledge and creative works to audiences. We need that distribution. We need our works as creators. I'm a filmmaker, Jack's an actor, the room is full of writers, photographers. We need our works to be distributed and to reach audiences. The question is, what kind of job are these guys doing, the intermediaries, in distributing our works as creators to audiences? I'm not sure if we have SADTU, the Democratic Teachers Union here. Yes, we do. You'll try to answer that question. I think David and Denise, as a librarian, and the many other librarians will tell us how well these guys do. Elsevier, one of the most profitable companies in the world in the academic publishing space, making billions. MultiChoice, the largest media company in Africa. And they have monopolies granted by copyright. Those monopolies have an incentive to maximize profit for their shareholders by keeping prices up and fees to creators down. This slide shows a few of the South African creators and communities who have been hard done by over the years, to say the least, by that system. Photographers, musicians, and others, actors who have died poor, and even their grandchildren are still struggling to get access to the remuneration which they should have received. Now, I often show this slide of, and I've been using an out-of-date version, so I went to the WIPO website, World Intellectual Property Organization, and got the very latest figures on income from intellectual property. It all speaks for itself. You know, I actually think the reason why the United States is not bothering to start a war on intellectual property yet is because it doesn't need to at the moment. So income from IP royalties, this is not just copyright, this is all of IP, but copyright is a component part of this. Income from IP royalties on all creativity, on all inventions around the world, topped $1 trillion in the past 24 months for the first time. And the United States gets about $130 billion of that. Where's Africa? The World Intellectual Property Organization, I think, is a little bit nervous to try and show Africa on the same slide as the United States. So they show us on another slide. And there's a little trick going on here that you need to notice. Check the scale on the left of the first slide. Goes up to 120 billion US dollars for the United States, followed by Germany at, 58 billion or something, and then other countries in Europe and Asia, and see how they changed the scale now that they wanted to bring Africa in. And actually, this is Africa and the Middle East together, United Arab Emirates up to $3.5 billion. South Africa just barely making it into the scale. Sharon, there's Kenya, Ghana, Uganda, Cameroon, nobody else in Africa worth mentioning, apparently. Oh, Egypt and North African countries are there. So copyright and IP as a whole represent a de facto tax on our continent. Represents a flow of resources out of the continent to pay others. Could that be because we don't have creatives? Could that be because we don't have actors, writers, musicians? Obviously not. The system operates in such a way that we don't get the fruits of our labor here in this country and in this continent. I went and just checked the pricing again of Long Walk to Freedom. You can just about find it for about $15 in South Africa and $15 in the USA. But the prevailing price in Exclusive Books, the biggest bookshop in South Africa, for that book, Long Walk to Freedom, last night I checked, is $32 US in South Africa. And on Amazon in the USA, $12. And then let's factor in the fact that South Africans on average earn 10 to 15 times less per capita than earners in the United States. So to be fair, for us to be able to access the works of Nelson Mandela equally to our counterparts in the United States or Europe, the price would have to be 10 times less. In fact, in dollars, it's anywhere from being equal to being 2.5 times more. Why? I guess publishers are selling to part of our market, not the whole of our market. It makes them more money if they sell only to a small part of our market. Musicians don't fare much better when it comes to distribution of revenue. There's the traditional model. These figures are a little bit old, but I'm reliably informed that they haven't changed much, that record labels, once they've taken 63% of income from music, this is global figures, and distributors 24%, there's about 13% left for the band. Once you are streaming, the streaming platforms have to take some, and by the time they've paid out, whether it's YouTube or Spotify or whoever it is, the artists are getting an even lower amount, 6.8%. So the goals of copyright reform have to be something along these lines, and this, I think, is what we have to discuss in the conference. Balancing the needs of creators and users, making sure there's fair remuneration for creatives, and access, call it fair use, call it broadening access with exceptions and limitations to copyright where necessary for audiences, all of which can support innovation and education. And then the small detail of regulating those who collect the money and sometimes lose it on the way to the bank, but are meant to pay it over to the artist, the collective management organizations. In South Africa, we have a fight, it's going to come up a lot in the conference, over getting our legislation passed fully into law. Our government, the ANC government, has been working for 10 years on meeting all of the objectives mentioned above with a new copyright amendment bill. So our democratic government has been working really hard to push forward with new legislation supported by our Recreate coalition, opposed by some of the vested interests. And in this conference, we're going to talk about all of that, but start with artificial intelligence, because how can you now have a conversation about anything that relates to expression without talking about AI and the new technologies which we're all using, we're all fearful of, we're all discussing and trying to figure out to what extent they are coming to eat Jack's lunch, everybody's lunch who is a creator, because they're sucking up all our creativity in order to generate something new. That's what generative AI is doing. AI is definitely a new frontier in the IP wars, to the extent that we need to figure out how to regulate AI if we want to continue having a fair approach to expression, copyright, intellectual property. But we mustn't forget, when we're busy trying to regulate AI, that this computerized methodologies, we used to, before AI became popular in the copyright circles, we referred to computational research, text and data mining, basically, words for the same thing, are being used as tools to solve humanity's problems. If you want to look at climate change, if you want to look at upcoming pandemics, predictive knowledge about possible upcoming pandemics and treatments, you're going to use AI these days. So is there a possibility, and I think these are the themes that will come up, particularly this afternoon and then again in Cape Town, I think, Chidi, a way to close the digital divide, and even a way for Africa to leapfrog, because this is a new technology, new to everyone. Maybe Vukosi has some of those answers. And what does it mean when it comes to the governance of traditional knowledge? So it's sort of obvious that we have to start with AI. I have a 3-minute video clip.
One of the things that's really clear to me in looking at text and data mining is that it is being used all the time, more or less, pretty universally against us.
Ask yourself what role you want to be within the research system. Do you only want to be the subject of research, or do you want to be the agent doing the research?
So who has the ability to either license the databases that they're using or run the risk of using a lot of databases and maybe being liable later? That's just the major players.
Governments and many large corporations, increasingly mid-sized corporations.
Large movie studios, to pick one example, have access to exactly the kind of work that we'd love to be able to do to analyze the biases that they make so much money off of.
What language should I translate to?
Most of the people that conduct this research in high-tech institutions with all the resources and infrastructure are in the global north. But when they are able to mine data, they do that without any limitation to geography.
When you look at the world of research exceptions, you find that the poorest countries often have the least ability to engage in research.
I find it very troubling that so many countries in Latin America are red.
There is a fundamental power imbalance globally. Whether you're talking about climate change research or whether you are talking about research relating to medicines.
So one of the big challenges is to make it possible for people to see the way that artificial intelligence will affect their day-to-day life, not just researchers, policymakers, but also ordinary people.
You can, by way of computational technologies, sequence the genetics of even a medicinal plant somewhere in Africa and upload it, and everybody anywhere in the world can access it from their fancy laboratories.
Ultimately, what I think matters is that we have diverse participation.
When you begin to develop these policies, begin to think critically about those who are not optimally participating in this space, but whose data are unwillingly, inevitably adapted into this space as well.
I find it troubling that this is not a top priority in the discussion of artificial intelligence.
you.